What's up everybody, it's Joe here with Joseph Blake Photography, and in today's video we have a whole host of Canon news. We've got R1 with a ship date, we've got an R5 Mark II teardown, we've got new lenses from Sigma, we've got potential new lenses from Canon, we've got cloud integration with new cameras from Canon, and we're gonna take a look into the crystal ball at some of the rumors that we have for Canon cameras into 2025. It's a whole lot, let's just jump right in. Joe, I am an adventure and portrait photographer here in Las Vegas, Nevada. It is the busy season of portrait photography. So right now my Canon R5 and my 85 1.4 are doing a whole lot of shooting, but I wanted to talk with you about some of this Canon news. Obviously, social media links down below for me, as well as links to my website and all of the gear that I use. And if you're interested in technology and the gear that we use and how we use it to create content, whether you're a photographer, a videographer, a social media influencer, maybe you're in marketing, maybe you're delivering directly to clients, maybe you're just shooting for your friends and family. Either way, that's the kind of thing that we talk about here on this channel. If you're interested in that, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. And if at the end of the video you think that I've done a good job, I would really appreciate it if you hit the like button. That's really what tells the algorithm that I'm doing all the right things, as well as watching to the end of the video where we're going to talk about these 2025 predictions. We've got 3 cameras that we want to look really closely at. So let's jump into talking about all of the news from Canon. Starting with the R1, the flagship camera from Canon, we now have a ship date. So we started hearing about the R1. I mean, really, I think we've all assumed that the R1 was coming back in 2019 when the R5 and R6 were announced. We got the R3, now we have the R1. We were estimating that we'd be seeing it in Q3 or Q4. Once it had a chance to kind of run through the Olympics and everybody got a chance to use it a little bit, and we got some feedback and some things were probably tweaked to change and all that sort of stuff. But now the Canon reps are now doing their thing, right? They're going out to photography shops and stores and doing trainings and talking to salespeople and camera enthusiasts about how this camera is going to get rolled out. And so now we can see on various retailers that the estimated ship date is going to be the 14th of November. And so we should be seeing this camera in the hands of folks who are purchasing it, whether by pre-order or in store, by the end of November. So now we knew that we would be getting the camera in 2024, but I'm really glad to see that it wasn't something where it went on sale like on the 31st of December or something. A real quick recap on the specs on the R1. We've got a 24 megapixel stacked BSI CMOS sensor. That comes with the Digic X processor that is now coupled with the Digic accelerator, which takes the dual pixel focus system and really considerably enhances it and add the ability to now do action priority and just super amps up that autofocus system. And while it is not a quad pixel focusing system, it does have dual directional or cross type focus points inside those focus pixels. The camera is coming with the 2nd generation of their eye autofocus that was initially released with the R3. It will be able to shoot 6K at 60 frames per second and 4K at 120 frames per second in 10-bit log internally with dual CF Express cards. And in electronic mode, it will be able to shoot at 40 frames per second with a half-second burst with a half press on the shutter. And in addition to that eye autofocus, it has a 9, almost 10 million dot EVF with blackout free shooting. And because it is a pro body, it does come with the built-in vertical grip, which means that it also comes with Canon's larger battery. So this thing will just keep shooting and shooting and shooting. It's also coming with Wi-Fi 6E and 2.5 gig Ethernet built in. Price for this camera here in the United States, $62.99. Now, Mark over at Paul's Photo did a kind of deep dive on a pre-production unit. I will link to that video down below. He really went into a lot of the specs and his impressions of shooting and really commented significantly about the fact that the eye autofocus, the autofocus in general with the new Digic accelerator was the best that they've ever seen. And I think for most of the folks that have had this camera in their hands for more than a hot minute have said pretty much the same thing. And even though it is very similar to the R5s, we do know that it will be faster and more accurate than the R5 Mark II, which for a sports and wildlife photography centered camera body I really do think that that is the most important feature that people are looking for after quality of the image off that sensor. Moving on to our next story, the folks over at Kalari, they make like filters and conversion kits for cameras. And they make a really cool RF mount system where you can mount your filters right on top of your sensor. I don't know, that kind of terrifies me, but I'm very curious about how this works. And if you've ever used this product, let me know down in the comments, because I'd be really interested to see how does it work? Like, is that okay? So these folks on their YouTube channel, they did a full teardown of the R5 Mark II. I mean, just absolutely destroyed it and pulled it apart. Now, they did a very thorough job of ripping this camera apart, and I will link that down below. But the one thing that I found really interesting in looking through this was that behind the main board, as well as behind the sensor, where, right, in the R5, it's right about here, right? People would attach like cooling fans and stuff to this. Well, right back here on the R5 Mark II, there is an open air channel, which connects to those kind of vents on the back or on the bottom that allows for passive cooling, right? That allows that heat to come through. So that's how they are allowing that heat to escape through the bottom of the camera. And one thing that I also kind of thought was interesting was that when the R5 first came out and a lot of people were trying to come up with ways to reduce the overheating issue, they really got inventive, and some people even took theirs apart and changed some of the kind of contact material that was being used, added in additional material to create dissipation opportunities for that heat. And now that we've seen the R5 Mark II taken apart, we don't see that they really engineered a lot more than this additional kind of heat space. And so there's no like copper heat sinks or heat pipes or anything big like that, which I assume is because it would have created a significant amount of weight and probably would have significantly increased the cost. Whereas in this case, they really just added a kind of a vent to allow that heat to dissipate, on top of improvements, I'm sure, in the sensor, the processor. Maybe the new processors are on a different process node, so they're being built or manufactured with a less power hungry, more efficient chip technology. And with the digic accelerator, the assumption is that that chip has newer tech in it that can do more of the work of the Digic X, and that is helped kind of, spread out the amount of work being done, which significantly reduces the amount of heat inside the body. So just super interesting to see there. One other thing that the Kalari folks found was that the HDMI board is actually no longer on the main circuit board. It's actually on its own board, which means that if for whatever reason it gets damaged, because those things can get yanked on quite a bit, it will be more easily serviceable, although you still do have to take the camera apart, but it doesn't require the entire board being replaced. They did mention that the camera was slightly harder to take apart than the original R5, partly because of new screws and the heat tape that has been added to dissipate heat off the sensor. Next, we've got two new cameras that have been added to the list of compatible cameras for Frame.io. Now, if you've ever used Frame.io, it is a cloud-based solution for collaboration on content. It allows you to upload, collaborate, and work on your content directly from your camera and other various sources. So if you are on a fast turnaround time, like say you're a photographer at the Olympics or at F1 here in Las Vegas, then when you are shooting, you want to get those photos and video off of your camera and to the folks who are going to be distributing it as quickly as possible. And that's one of the things that Frame.io does. And so this week we actually heard that the Canon C80 and the C400, the newest entrants to the cinema line before the C70, no, there's no C70 Mark II. The C80 and the C400, the two newest entrants to the cinema line from Canon, will now both be supported for their camera to cloud functionality. And with their integrations in things like Lightroom and Premiere, it's like shooting tethered, but for photo and video, and you don't actually have to be right there at the computer. Next up, we've got patents for two brand new super telephoto lenses from Canon, a 400 and a 600 millimeter variant. But what's really interesting about these is that both of them are listed as being DOTC variants, which means for the DO side of things, if you're not familiar, DO means diffractive optics, which is a fancy type of glass that Canon can put in their lenses that allows them to be lighter and smaller, but still perform at a higher level optically. These lenses sometimes come with a green ring on them, and these lenses in some cases will have multiple layers of diffractive optics, which means that they'll probably be shorter and smaller than existing lenses of those focal lengths. They're also teleconverter lenses, which means that they will come with built-in teleconverter. And based on the patent information that we have, it looks like these would be 1.4 teleconverters. So a 600, potentially going up to about an 800, 820 millimeter lens, and the 400 going up to about 600 or 550. The patent math is a little weird, and who knows if they'll ever actually make these lenses. I don't know, Canon is doing some really interesting things with the RF mount and just coming up with all sorts of formulas and patenting them to kind of create a lot of opportunities. Whether they'll actually ever get built, who knows, but a 400 mil that becomes a 600 mil that has diffractive optics, so it's super light. And both of these are f4s to start with, so with their teleconverters, they end up being f5.6. So, I mean, I don't think I would sneeze an 800 millimeter f5.6 with IS-L lens from Canon that has diffractive optics, so it's a little smaller and a little lighter. Fun to think about. Also fun to think about, and on the lens side of things, recently Sigma had some words to say about their relationship with the Canon RF mount. Sigma makes phenomenal lenses. I'm actually shooting on a Sigma EF 35mm 1.4 art that is adapted to my R5 Mark II, and I absolutely love this lens. It's the lens that I do almost all of my videos on. I think it's beautiful. I love how it works. I love how light it is. But Sigma has been releasing a handful of APS-C RF mount glass recently, and they've said that Canon and the RF mount have been a little more receptive to the idea of getting more lenses out there into the market, that the E-mount is still far more popular for them. They talked about some new lenses that we're going to be seeing on the APS-C side coming in January. Looks like some primes. They mentioned 16, 23, 30, and 56 millimeters in f1.4 varieties from Sigma at the beginning of next year. So that is very exciting. So if you're shooting with like an R7 or an R10 or an R50 and you want to get into better glass, that is something that will be coming. But last but not least, another thing that potentially will be coming is we have some and these are very, very cloudy rumors as we look into the crystal ball for 2025. We look at the lineup that Canon has. We know that we've got the R1 coming at the end of this year. We've got the R3 Mark II probably next year, the R6 Mark III next year, and potential updates to the APS-C line of cameras. 3 cameras specifically are being kind of mentioned in the echoes of Rumorville, which are number 1, the long-awaited retro camera from Canon with a body similar to something like the F1 or the AE1. I think we can pretty squarely say that in the retro department, the Canon AE1 program is one of the most popular of the older film cameras that Canon users will kind of mention. I was literally doing photos this weekend, ran into another photographer. We were talking about Canon cameras, and she mentioned that she absolutely has an AE1, loves using it. I have an AE1, I love using it. So not uncommon, and I think that that would probably be one of the better directions for them to go from the standpoint of potential retro body. The other bit of information that we have is that it would be a full frame camera. So maybe imagine something like the R8, right? I wouldn't assume that in that body size they would be able to put image stabilization or IBIS in body, but you know, one SD card, 20 to 30 megapixels, full frame, dual pixel autofocus 2, right? It doesn't need to have eye autofocus. It doesn't need to have a digic accelerator or anything like that. But I'll be honest, I think it would be super fun to walk around with a camera like that, especially if we then throw on adapted FD lenses. I think that would be super cool. Give me an ISO dial, right? Next in the potential rumored bodies for 2025 is a APS-C that is video focused. So the most recent updates that we've seen in the cinema line have all been full frame 6K sensors. So I wouldn't be shocked if we saw something akin to, you know, like an R5C, but for APS-C, right? Like an R7C, right? A 30-ish megapixel camera with dual pixel autofocus 2, but you give it all the trappings of a cinema camera, right? You give it raw recording, multiple UHD and DCI codecs, maybe do 6K up to 30, and then give it some of those things that we've seen in the R5 Mark II on the cinema side. Give us false color, zebras, monitors, all that kind of stuff. And I think you'd end up with a super popular camera that would get amateur and prosumer kind of filmmakers getting into Canon when maybe they'd be looking at Fuji or Sony to initially jump into that, right? Give us C-Log 2, that sort of stuff, right? I think that would definitely be something that could potentially grab a lot of customers that Canon right now is potentially losing. And last but not least, and this is the rumor that I think we've been hearing for probably 6 years now, is that we would be seeing a super high resolution R series camera. I think at one point we thought we were going to get the RS, right? In the past, we've had the 5DS and 5DS-R. And so I think a super high resolution stills-based camera from Canon is still something that they could do to compete again on the photography side, not on the videography side, to take on folks who are shooting with high resolution Sonys or medium format Fujis. And the numbers that we're seeing bantied about are approximately 100 megapixels. Those are sensor sizes that Canon has been testing for quite some time. We've seen patents, we've seen news releases, all of that stuff. And either they just don't see the market for it, or they don't see that the sensor technology that they currently have available is good enough to meet whatever standard it is that they are trying to reach. And maybe now with more, 60 and 60 plus megapixel sensors being very popular for some shooters, for certain types of shooters, like landscape wildlife photographers, I think that is definitely something that they could get into and do well with, especially now that we have the Digic X coupled with the Digic Accelerator. I think there's a lot that they could do there. The real question is, do they see that as a viable market where they would be able to sell units and have it make sense for them? So that is it for the Canon news. I know that was a lot of information, and I appreciate you sticking with me. Hopefully you did, because again, that's what the YouTube algorithm cares about, that and likes. So if you like this video, I'd appreciate it if you hit the like button. That means a lot to me. And if you are interested in information like this, in the technology that we use to create content and the way that we create it, then go ahead and hit the subscribe button and hit the bell so that you're alerted when I make a new video. We crushed all the way through 14,000 subscribers here, and I'm barreling towards 15. Would really love to get to 16 before the end of the year. And if there's something specific that you'd like me to cover, go ahead and let me know down in the comments, or if there's anything about this video that you found interesting or wanted to talk about, go ahead and post down there. I try to respond to the first handful of comments whenever I can, but I do get a couple of 100 comments a day, so it is kind of difficult, so I do my best. Obviously, socials down below, my Instagram as well, which I am trying to rebuild right now, so I appreciate anybody who can go over there and give me a follow. I'll be posting more and more once the busy season ends for photography. Every weekend I am shooting families and babies and all that sort of stuff, so it is the busy season for photography. While it's also the busy season for technology, Techtober is real. Anyway, thanks for everyone who has watched this far into the video. I really appreciate it. And thank you for everyone who has been subscribed to the channel since the beginning. Thank you so much, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks, bye.